Yeah, so thanks for reading my first slide. Before we dig into the actual talk, I want to take a real scientific poll in the room and ask you if you are, raise your hand if you're completely satisfied at your current job. And if you're in between jobs right now, think of your most recent job. So again, really, really scientific. Right, that's why. Yeah, that's why. Like we're with our coworkers and bosses, so yeah, not super scientific, but I know you're happy, Tim. So, are you completely satisfied? That was I looked around the room. That was maybe 30% of you, so not great. There was a Gallup poll in 2018, so fairly recently, that asked a number of questions to U.S. workers, and fewer than half of them were completely satisfied. So I think that's kind of a sad number. But that actually, job satisfaction isn't what brings me here today, isn't what made me into forming my own business. But let me give you a little background on me before I dig in too. I graduated college with a degree in computer science, and while I was in college, I was working as a web developer part-time since the year 2000. Then I transitioned and started working at a university for about 12 years, University Pennsylvania. At Wharton, so a few Wharton folks here. That was a great job, but I ended up moving then to North Carolina in 2015 to escape Philadelphia winters. So my husband and I moved to North Carolina in 2015, and then I formed my business in 2017. So I moved to North Carolina, took a job at Cactus, another company that's here, and they're another great company. Took a full-time position there before transitioning and becoming a contractor and working for myself. So I'm all that stuff on the right. I'm none of those things on the left. So while I'm not a lawyer and I'm not an accountant, I work pretty closely with my accountant. So everything I do on a day-to-day basis, in fact, I end up talking to him maybe sending him an email once a week. So he loves me, sure. But I just want to make sure that the IRS is happy with me. So everything I'm talking about today has been legal for me. And a lot of it has to do with U.S. entities for what it's worth, but I have stuff that's kind of more universal as well. So this is an overall overview of what I'll be talking about today. How did I get here? Not here at DjangoCon, but here running my own business for the past 2+ years. The decision making and the fear around that and how I addressed that. Then I'll get to the meat of the presentation, or I'm vegan, so I like to call it the plant-based meat alternative, which is the how to roll your own business, so the actual the law stuff and the accounting stuff and all that stuff. Then I'll get to finding clients, hopefully, if I don't run out of time, which is my most personal and my favorite part of this talk. I have a lot of stories there about how I've found clients in the past 2 years. And then I have some free materials to send you all off with. Can somebody shout out what city this is taken in? Yeah, everybody. Yeah, a lot of people know. This is the Painted Ladies in San Francisco. So San Francisco figures heavily into my story of how I ended up running my own show. So in late 2016, my husband got a job offer, and it was too interesting to pass up. We had lived in North Carolina for 2 years, and he had always dreamed of living in San Francisco, and we were kind of adventurous. We had moved to North Carolina and started a new life there, and I was like, look, if this is the job for you, let's you did this for me, let's take the next step, let's go to California. So we decided we're gonna move to California. And I didn't really think too much about my job other than in the back of my mind. I was like, well, I really like my job, so maybe I can somehow keep it. So we decided to move to California, to San Francisco, and his job, because it was in the school system there, would begin in the following summer. So we had a long time to kind of transition out there. And in the spring of 2017, we went out and spent some time in San Francisco, gauging the neighborhoods and deciding where to live. And we met up with a good friend of mine who had moved out there from Philadelphia for this super high-profile job at a super high-profile social media company out there. And she had gotten a moving package and a signing bonus and a pretty sweet salary, and she was like, Erin, what are you doing? You're moving out here and you're not even looking at all these tech jobs. And I thought about that for 30 seconds, and I was like, no, that's okay. I know what's become of the tech interview because I've been doing them previously. I hadn't done any like really recently because I was pretty happy in my job, but I had a number of friends who would quit their full-time jobs in order to do tech interviews. Does anybody know anybody like that? So, or have you done that? There's a really good talk at PyCon in 2016 called, has anybody seen it, 100 CS Interviews by Susan Tan? Highly recommend that. Don't love what's become of tech interviews overall. So, so I said, all right, I really want to stay with my job. So I came back and I talked to my boss, who's here, and she was like, well, let's see if we can make this work. And we talked to HR, and HR was like, yeah, this sounds pretty good. But then they looked into California tax law, and of all the states, like California has the most complicated one. And they were like, here's the thing, we could hire you as a contractor. You're probably not going to like that idea. I had the exact opposite reaction from what they were expecting. I was like, whoa, like for real? Like I knew other contractors who worked there, and it seemed like they could kind of do whatever they wanted. They could like pick the projects they wanted and work from home when they wanted. So I was like, ooh, that sounds interesting. So I talked to every single contractor I knew, emails, really long phone calls, took them out to lunches and was like, how do you do this? And then I just jumped. I just did it. Not to say that that didn't come with fears. And there's a picture of someone writing, because I think writing down your fears is a good way to address them, but also just thinking through them. Fears are not a bad thing. Fear is there to protect you. And you probably are going to face some fear when you have a big life-changing decision, like deciding to move to California or deciding to start your own business. I don't know if anybody watches Gilmore Girls, but I really like this. This is a 30-second clip from Gilmore Girls about this very subject.
Everybody else when they're taking on something big.
Well, then what does everybody else do to get through this feeling?
They run in the back, throw up, pass out, and smack their head on the floor. That's what I did on the first morning I opened the diner. Look, there is no button to push to get you through this. You just gotta jump in and be scared and stick with it until it gets fun.
How long until the diner got fun?
About a year.
Wow. And there's no button?
Nope.
How about a lever? Can I pull a lever?
Nope.
Turn a knob?
Nope.
You just jump?
You just jump.
I want to do it.
You should though.
So I don't know if you caught at the very beginning there, but Lorelai asked him about how she felt so nervous about this decision to start her own inn, and she's talking to her friend who's a local business owner and asking him what did he do about all those fears, and he said, well, for the first year I went into my storage room and threw up. And you know what? That physiological response to fear is super real. I've been doing this for a little over 2 years. I have not had a single time when I didn't have a contract, but I can give myself a stomachache by thinking about, ooh, where's my next contract coming from? Because it's just part of the thing, But I also like that he's super encouraging to her there, which is also the experience I had when I talked to every contractor I knew. And then you can always have this in the back of your mind if you are gonna, start your own business. If you decide to start your own business, if you decide to roll your own and it doesn't work out for whatever reason, either you can't find the work or you don't like doing it, you can go back to W-2 work. There's nothing to stop you, especially as most of us here, or a lot of us here are web developers. Our tech skills are highly in need, so almost nothing is irreversible in career land. All right, now I'm going to get to the how-to, and I'm going to talk about startup costs, because throughout this section where I'm talking about how to run your own business, I think it's super vital to keep your startup costs low, because the best way to make money is to save money, right? So I'm going to talk about a couple of different business entities. There are more than these two, LLC and sole proprietorship. But these are the two of all the contractors that I currently know. They fit into one of these categories. They either formed an LLC or they do it as a sole proprietorship. So, quick definition, LLC stands for Limited Liability Company. It's a private limited company in the US. So it's purely a US type of institution. And it's actually fairly recent. A sole proprietorship is a little different because it's much simpler, but it's not a legal entity. So that's kind of the huge difference between forming an LLC and all the work that goes into that versus just saying hey, I'm going to be a sole proprietor today. Like, that's basically all it takes to start a sole proprietorship. So there's negatives and positives for both. Some negatives on sole proprietorship is that there's going to be no distinction between the business you form and you. So should the worst thing happen, should your business get sued, like, your personal assets are liable. So this is a negative about sole proprietorship. You really can't get separate credit lines, and other businesses might not want to work with you if you form a sole proprietorship. They might not take you that seriously, maybe, depending on the business. You also can't expand. I mean, sole proprietorship is what the name is. It's sole. It's just you. So all these negatives, you might think, like, why would I ever form one? Well, it's simple and it's cheap. And I definitely know, most of the contractors I know have formed an LLC, but a few of them have been doing sole proprietorship for many years, and it just works for them just fine. And it means they had a lot fewer forms to fill out, and they had a few $100s less of startup costs, and so it works for them okay. So I would say, of the two, they're both pretty good, but I chose LLC. I think it's the better one for me. When I was talking to all the consultants, when I was starting this whole thing, every single one of them said form an LLC. It's like having free business insurance. It's a way to separate yourself from your business. So how do you form an LLC? These are the forms you're going to need. So you've got your application for your EIN, which stands for Employer Identification Number, and that's the number that the clients that you work with are going to need in order to pay you and, like, file their W-9s. And I know this is, like, the really exciting part of the talk. Articles of organization, and these act as a charter for your business and say what you're going to do in your business. The only time I've needed these are when I formed my LLC and when I signed up for a business checking account. I've never needed these any other time, so I don't really know what they're needed for other than to like set it all up. And then you're going to need your Secretary of State Statement of Information. So this tells your Secretary of State your business name and your registered agent, which I'm going to get back to. I used LegalZoom for this process. I liked them quite a bit. In some ways, they had one huge negative, but I'll get to that in a moment. I would also say, while I'm suggesting LegalZoom on the slide, I would also say consider talking to a local lawyer, because then you get this, like, relationship with someone, and you can use them again if you need them, and it's kind of nice to have that. So I would say either LegalZoom or talk to a local lawyer if you can find one who's going to charge you not too much, because LegalZoom is pretty inexpensive if you choose, like, the cheapest wizard, which is what I did. Choose a registered agent. So as I was going through that LegalZoom wizard, setting up my LLC, they said, you need a registered agent, and we have a really cheap service, so just use us. And I did a little Googling, not much, and was like, all right, I guess you guys are cheap, and I have to have one. I have no idea what they are. All right, you're my registered agent. And then I get this separate bill from LegalZoom for $300. And I called them, and I was like, I don't want this. So I Googled it, and it turns out you can be your own registered agent, and you don't need to do anything fancy. It's not like you need to be a notary or anything. Like, all you need as a registered agent is, like, a physical address where you can be found during business hours. So if you're working from home, that's your home address. So I guess you're going to get a little bit more business junk mail, which is about the only negative I can think of. You're a little more findable if you want to, stay off the grid. It's not great, but you're also going to want to open a business checking account. So this is super important, especially if you're forming an LLC and you want to take advantage of the fact that you are separate from your business. Because if you commingle funds, you're kind of erasing everything that you get from having an LLC. So your clients that work with you through whatever payment system, they're going to want your business checking account. They're not going to want to pay you directly to your personal account. So it's a little different from being a W-2 and giving them your personal account and they direct deposit. They really want a business checking account. So for this, you're going to need to have formed your business, and you're going to need your employer identification number and your charter, your articles of organization. So however, you can save on startup costs here as well by Googling free business checking and finding any number of online banks out there that do free business checking, or do like I do, which is I found a local bank I liked. I walked in and was like, what do I have to do to not pay for business checking? Like, what what criteria do I need to meet to not pay for it? Like what gets the fee waived? And yeah, like it's a lot of banks do it. So you're gonna want to choose a name. You absolutely have to do this if you're forming a business. You want it to be memorable, distinct, and easy to spell, and it has to be available in your state. So when I formed my business in California, I checked Erin Rachel Consulting, which is my first and middle name, and what I'm doing in a very general sense was available, and I'm really not creative when it comes to naming things, so that worked for me. Don't ask me to name your band. But one other note here, registered trademarks are not allowed. So a friend of mine who is another contractor, he wanted to use the word Python in his business name, so capital P Python, and I forget what the name was, but he didn't look into it first, and he just sent it off to the Secretary of State. So he had to fill out that form twice because the Secretary of State came back and they were like, nope. So you can't be like the Disney, Netflix, Bank of America coding emporium. Like, gotta come up with something different. Create a website. So I'm gonna really go over this. Yeah, I mean, who doesn't have a website in this room? But you want to be able to be findable out there on the internet. There's free options out there, but some of them might be a little unprofessional because they have then like ads. However, if you are starting small, like go for a free option. Why not? One thing, has anybody heard of Unsplash, or everybody heard of Unsplash? A few people. Huge fan of Unsplash. If you like the photos I've been using in this presentation, they were all from Unsplash, and so these are all Creative Commons licensed photos. It's a beautiful website. It's super easy to like search and find really cool photos. And because they're Creative Commons licensed, you can use them in anything like social media posts or your website or your slides. I like to give the photographers props, but I don't have to. Do you need a logo? I don't know. Maybe. I don't have a logo, but depending on your business, you might need one. Who's heard of Canva? Not too many. Oh, cool. All right. Yeah. So Canva is a really great online graphic design tool. I'm not a graphic designer, but I can use it. So it's like easy. So it's really cool. My husband introduced it to me. And first I was using it for like social media posts, like for personal reasons, but I've used it for some professional reasons now. It just makes it really easy. It is all free. They have a paid version with a few other bells and whistles, but the free version kind of covers you. So this is my like #1 tip for starting your own business. I would say hire an accountant. Like just find an accountant to work with you. I have been working with my accountant since I formed my business, and he's just so great. He is fantastic. He does my taxes, and when you form your business, you actually don't have to necessarily do payroll, because if you're just you can just like transfer, you can get paid into your business checking account and transfer money out, which is what I was doing in the very beginning. But then I wanted to have a solo 401k for my business, my retirement fund, and I talked to him about it, and he said, well, the easiest and most up and up way to do that is to have payroll, so you can then calculate how much you are like actually allowed to put into your retirement plan based on what you pay yourself. So he does my payroll now too. Quarterly estimated payments. So I have a note about this. So if you're forming your business, so let's say you're forming your business this year and you've been a W-2 employee. So you absolutely, if you have your own business, you want to pay your quarterly estimated payments throughout the year, which are like January, and like every quarter. You're going to be paying the state and the federal level what you estimate you're going to owe them at the end of, come April 15th. So you absolutely must do that, or you actually have to pay a fairly high penalty. I asked my accountant about this because I was like, can I just pay the penalty? And he was like, he told me what it was, and I was like, no. So yeah, you want to pay these. But for that first year that you form your business, one of my contractor friends told me this, as long as you were a W-2 employee also that year, you don't have to pay them that year. So I didn't. I just put that money away. That's for me is a little more time I got to spend in my savings account or my whatever, brokerage account or whatever. So something to know for sure if you're just freshly forming your business. Also, he helped me decide to, after I'd formed my LLC, he files me as an S Corp, and this has to do with how much money you make. If you file as an S Corp, you can save a little money too. I found my accountant on Thumbtack. Have you all heard of Thumbtack? Anybody interviewed there? They have a really good interview. I didn't work there, but I did interview there. So Thumbtack is, have you heard of Angie's List? It's like Angie's List, but it's free, and it's better. It's like got a better UI. So see you later, Angie's List. So Thumbtack is, oh, I hope they're not here. Do they still exist? So yeah, Thumbtack is huge. If you have like any service people that you're hiring in general, like I highly recommend, even for your like personal use. My accountant, I love him so much. He loves me too, I'm sure. So one thing I do that I think makes him love me a little bit is I keep a running spreadsheet of my money coming in and my money going out, and that helps him to figure out what to pay in those quarterly estimated payments. And then also when he does my taxes, he looks at that. And I'm going to give you a free example here. So you can find this. It's on. There's like a whole page of links. If you go to bit.ly/rollyourownbiz, everything that I'm mentioning here today is on this page. But this is a screen. This is kind of a terrible screenshot of a Google Doc that I use. It's a sample of a Google Doc. This is not my real one, but as you can see, I'm keeping track of a payment. So when I invoice out, and once it goes into my account, then I track it here. I say like the date that it came in and the amount that I invoiced. Anything to do with my business. I pay for a yearly subscription to Google Drive, or I bought an Amazon headset. Like anything that I'm using for my business is an expense. So these are like paying my accountant, CPA fee. These are super obvious things that you might think like, oh, of course. But one thing that I didn't realize until I talked to all these contractors was you can also expense a portion of your rent or your mortgage. So, and I'm seeing nodding heads, so people know this already, but I think not everybody knows this. So up to, I think it's 25%, depending on square footage. So it's very like mathy, but you have to take the square footage of your home, and you have to have dedicated space to your office. So let's say you have a 2-bedroom apartment and it's 1,000 square feet, and you have a 100 square foot room in which you do your business, and that's really just like that spare bedroom is really just dedicated to your business. In that case, that's 10% of your square footage, so 10% of your rent each month, or your mortgage or whatever, can get expensed. So you can keep track of that. And that percentage also goes to utilities. So your water and trash and electric, all those things, you can expense them all. Traveling for conferences, these are the kind of things that you might be thinking of, but that percentage is a huge way to save money. So as you are forming your own business, you're going to have to roll your own benefits as well. And one of the things I mentioned earlier was I started my own solo 401k for my business. And you may know that the maximum for employee contributions this year, 2019, was $19,000. Sure, everybody knows that, right? But what you might not know is that employer contributions on top of that are 25% of employee compensation. So what I decide to pay myself on payroll, I can take 25% of that and put that in my 401k too. So that's like way more money than W-2 employees can put away, which is pretty great. It's a max, from what I read online, it's a max of 56,000, which is so much higher than 19,000. But yeah, so I'm not sure if that total is correct or not, but I found that on a website. You're also going to want to get your own health insurance. So I think this is actually what probably hangs most people up in the US from running their own show, right? Yeah, I'm seeing nodding heads again. It's like, yeah, when are we going to get Medicare for all? No, it's another story, another talk. Don't at me. So when I formed my business in California, so the California state employees, my husband was working for the school district there. The state employees have amazing benefits. They have Kaiser, which is really great. They're also like striking, which is awesome. But they have Kaiser, which is a really great health system. And I was able to get on his benefits for free in California, which was sweet. But then we moved back to North Carolina, and I was like, I'll just be on your benefits again. And then we got the bill for like $700 a month. And I was like, I think I can get cheaper health insurance and just like never go to the doctor. So that's what I do. I have a high deductible healthcare plan, which is called the Never Go to the Doctor plan. unless you want to pay up to $7,000 in your deductible first. However, you can also, with a high deductible healthcare plan, you can get an HSA, which is really nice. This is a little bit of extra funds on top of that money that you can do pre-tax as well. You can put up to, this year it's $3,500 in your HSA as a single person. So that money can then be, you can use it at the doctor's. I don't. I actually just invest mine, because if you have up to, I think it's 1,000 or 2,000, I don't know the number, but if you have up to a certain amount in your HSA account, you can actually also invest that. You're also going to want to think about vacation and holidays. It's really important to not burn yourself out. So as you're planning, as you're working for yourself and you're like, oh, I can work every day, like who needs Saturday and Sunday off? Yeah, you don't really want to do that, in my opinion. So you're going to want to think through like what days you want to tell people that you're not going to be available when you are working with clients. Okay, so hiring an accountant, best decision. Determining your rate, hardest decision. 100% hardest decision. I don't know if you all feel like this is great, but I think the best way to determine your rate is actually to kind of get a consensus. I think this is probably the best way. And it's my feeling that if you talk to other consultants you know and you tell them what you're charging, they're more likely to tell you, you know, to sort of reciprocate that. And I've found that really works. You can also use this formula. I didn't end up using this, but I know some people do. So you take the salary of, like, let's say that position that client you're working with, here's the salary for that kind of work. Multiply it by 2, and you divide it by the number of hours you would work for a year, and that would be a rate. That would be a good rate. That was way higher than what my clients were willing to pay, but it's a formula somebody's using. You can ask your client, so you can go ahead and, like, if your client is excited to work with you, they probably would tell you like the range. They'll probably tell you the low end of the range anyway. You know, this kind of puts the negotiating in their court, so it's like, I don't know. I asked. I just researched. It's probably, I mean, other than healthcare, it's like a huge hang up for running your own business. When you're writing your contracts, you want to include you can include payment dates, like within 30 days of receipt of my contract, of my invoice, I expect payment. You can consider putting language around a late fee in case they are kind of a client who might not pay you on time. This would get them excited to pay you on time. All right, so, wow, I flew through that, awesome. Finding clients, so this is like my most fun part of the talk to me. So I'd say that social media can be bad and good. I mean, I think that's just like so generally true, but I mean, the bad side is that you are now a little bit more public of who you are. So like what you're posting is, you know, may make people unhappy. So you kind of want to think about that. But there's good too, for sure. So I have this example here. So this is when we moved. We moved in July of 2017 to California. We moved back a year later because we didn't want to stay there, but that's another talk too. So we moved in July, and I posted this on Facebook, just like for fun, whatever. I was like, hey, I give myself 2 weeks off for this move. It's a huge move. And next week I'm going to start as a consultant. And I was going to start working with that company that I had been working with full time, but as a consultant now. And it got the attention of somebody at another former employer, the University of Pennsylvania, who said, like, hey, I've got a project too. You're saying you're working for yourself now, so that means you're a free agent. And so this turned into a project off and on since that time I've been working on. Like, I've been working with that team off and on. So, I mean, there's definitely benefits to being vocal on social media when it comes to running your own business. You might want to get published, so write a technical blog post and get noticed by that company that built that awesome CMS, and kind of maybe work with them as a client. You might want to give talks. I don't know that this has worked for anyone who I know personally, but I feel like, anything you can do to get your name out there is really good. Reach out to former employers and gratitude. So these are separate bullets, but I have a story about this as well. I had worked at University of Pennsylvania for many years, and I had many good bosses there, and I feel like all my bosses, I've learned so many different things and have like been important to me at different facets. But I had this one particular boss who was my last boss at University of Pennsylvania, who was so great, and he was like so technical when I needed someone to be technical in my career. Like I was at that point in my career where I was ready to advance technically, and then he was just like a kind person. So he was so great, and I had run into someone who worked for him at PyCon, and I was talking about him. Jason is the name of my former boss. I was talking about him to this like coworker, and I was like, man, he was such a good boss. I should really just like write to him and tell him that. And this former coworker was like, yeah, just do it. And so I went home and I like wrote this like long email and was just like, yeah, you were really great. And he responded, and it was 100% just like gratitude in my heart. I had work, I was fine, but I just wanted to like share that because he was so important to me. And he responded, and I have a lot of former bosses here, so you are all getting emails. So he responded, wow, I'm having such a stressful day. That was like just what I needed. Thank you so much. Also, are you working for yourself now? Because we're transitioning this website to Django. So can you come back and work with us like as a consultant? And so, yeah, I worked on that project for a year until completion. The project is now live, and it was great. I loved working on the project because I had built it in Cold Fusion. I said it initially, and so I got to transition it to Django. Yay! So that was just great. There are, this is, like I said, this is like my heart. Finding clients is really the exciting part. It can be a little bit nerve-wracking, but it's also pretty great. It's especially great if you keep this in mind, just as your mantra. And I hesitate to say, like, always be giving all the time of yourself, because that's a surefire way for burnout. But always be giving during the workday. Think of the person that you're working for, whether you're a W-2 employee or you work for yourself. Think of what they need and ask them, and always be giving and always be thinking of them and putting their needs at the top, or near the top of your list, and you'll be surprised at what comes back to you. This is it's such a simple phrase, but it's Alan Donegan he formed this company in England called the Pop-Up Business School, and he helps like fledgling entrepreneurs who are pretty small scale. He helps them like figure out how to run their businesses, and there's a good podcast where he's interviewed that I link to on that page that I'm going to share again. So always be giving. So I did earlier talk about rolling your own benefits, but there are definitely benefits to rolling your own job. You can work when and where you want. I have a friend, one of the many contractors who I had a phone call with. He works once a week. He travels by Uber or Lyft. He takes a Lyft into the city to work, and he opens up in the back of the car. He like opens up his laptop and answers emails, and that's billable time for him. I'm like, that's great. You're turning travel time into billable time. I don't want to work in a car, but it works for him. That's great. You can set your own hours within reason. So you are still going to be working with clients who are, in the office during office hours, and they probably want you available at least part of that time. But you can scale, like you might want to scale back to 30 or 32 hours or, whatever. And you can kind of set that schedule where you feel like you can put in that number of hours at a computer and still feel human. I think that's super important, and one of the biggest benefits to me, for sure. And you can turn away projects. So basically, you can get I have turned away a project. It was for like a mussel farming or something. Yeah. I know. I was like, I'm a vegan, so I don't really want to like help someone kill mussels. Like, are they even alive? I don't know, but I don't want to eat them. They're gross. That's gross. No thanks. So you can work for who you want, and and a positive side of that would be like there was a company I really wanted to work with, and so I got to work with them too for like a little stint, and so that was really fun for me. Wow, I'm going so fast. That's amazing. Yeah, I am definitely going to have time for questions. Little contracting by the numbers. So this NPR did a whole thing on contracting in 2018. So you can go to that link that I'll share again and find the NPR section on contracting that they did, like little mini radio episodes and things like that. And they also gathered data. And 1 in 5 US workers are contract workers. So I feel like that's really high. Like, I did not figure that would be that high. In our industry, it seems like about right, but I was actually like really surprised by that. Less surprised about this, that 65% of those contractors are male. So going back to that story of calling and emailing and having lunch with those contractors, every single one of them was a man. I've since met some female contractors, which is great, but I'd like to equalize this a little bit. If you're a man, don't let that like hold you back, but I'd like to equalize this back a little bit. Make it 50-50, that'd be nice and even. Some further reading and listening on the topic. I mentioned Alan Donegan earlier. He was interviewed on the Choose FI podcast. That is my absolute favorite podcast out there. If anybody's familiar with the FIRE movement, it's like probably one of the biggest ones about that. Journey to Launch is another like FIRE-related. FIRE stands for Financial Independence, Retire Early. It's not a cult, but it is. So Journey to Launch is another like FI like related podcast, and episode 38 is a pretty good one of that. I think that's where she interviews an accountant, and so I actually got a lot of tips for my day-to-day and also for this talk from that. That was a really great episode. Highly recommend that one. I mentioned Susie Moore's book, What If It Does Work Out, a little bit during this talk. And it was like I read it on a plane ride, so it's a short one about how she decided to like slowly transition to working for herself from being in an office and like staring longingly out the window. Moneysplained podcast. Moneysplained is a podcast that's like super short form. I like episode 6, but really all of them are good. Episode 6 is called Freelance Isn't Free. So that's a good one. NPR has I mentioned that poll there, and they have a few other articles and things. All Up in Your Business is a YouTube channel, and it's an accountant, and she's just so fun and relatable. Highly recommend her. And then, these are the other free resources I mentioned during my talk that I think a lot of you aren't familiar with, which is great. So now you are. Canva is that free graphic design tool. Thumbtack is that free service search Angie's List better than Angie's List site. Unsplash is that Creative Commons license search engine website that's just beautiful and has lots of cat pictures. And then these are all mentioned on my website page there. So if you go to bit.ly/rollyourownbiz, B-I-Z, you can find all these links and all the links to the podcasts that I love, and also like a link to like, did I miss any podcasts or things that you love? Like, reach out to me. So you can reach out to me on Twitter. I'm somewhat on Twitter. You can find me on my website. I want to leave you with this line from a poem by Mary Oliver, with these two poems. Sorry. Tell me what it is you plan to do with your one wild and precious life. And then we've got poet Nael, age 6. The tiger, he destroyed his cage. Yes, yes, the tiger is out. That one makes me cry, so I saved it for the end. So thank you, and I think we do have maybe a minute for questions? Okay, great.
Yes, we do. Thank you so much.
Thanks a lot, Erin. That was really interesting. It seems that your bosses have been really important and valuable to you all along, but how good is your current boss at helping you along?
It's pretty chill. She's pretty chill, yeah. I don't really have to like ask for vacation. I just take it. Yeah, it's pretty great. I do miss having a boss. Like leaving Karen was super hard, so yeah.
Hi, Erin. Do you have any tips for getting out of pajamas in the morning, keeping the motivation up for that, and avoiding isolation?
Why get out of pajamas? I don't know why. My pajamas are super comfy. I mean, get outside. Like the first thing I do most days is I go out for like a walk. I have a trail behind my apartment, so I I think like exercise is probably like the best way to start a day, but that's like if you work for yourself or don't work for yourself, I think that's true. Just get outside and exercise a little if you can. In Philly, it's hard with those winters. But
Hi.
Hi.
I also have a LLC that I'm running, but I'm definitely doing something different. So I just wanted to get your opinion. You might have researched this topic. I don't have an accountant. So what I do is that I have online QuickBooks that is linked to my business accounts and the credit card accounts, and it will fetch all my transactions, and it will create
Yeah.
a balance sheet for me in the end of the year. And I do it myself. So, but you said that its number one tip is like hire an accountant. So I was wondering, am I missing anything? So just want to get your opinion.
No, I mean, if you are comfortable doing it yourself, like, I'd say do it yourself. I tried like a QuickBooks competitor. I forget what they were called, but I was just like, that is way too much overhead for me. I'd rather just keep that spreadsheet that I have like an example on this page. That spreadsheet does everything for me as far as like tracking my expenses. So one thing I didn't mention is it's super important to keep those receipts and bills. So I keep all those in Google Drive. So that's why I pay for Google Drive too. So hang on to those receipts. You never need them, hopefully, but they're there. And I have been asked about QuickBooks before. I find it to be like way too much overhead for me personally, and I'd much rather just have an accountant who I can trust. But I mean, if that's working for you, no reason, no.
Thanks.
Hi, thank you for the talk. I
Thanks.
wondered if you know of any complications between being based out of multiple places, multiple states, or moving while you're
Ooh.
contracting.
That's interesting. I think you just form your business where you form your business, and that's like where you file your taxes. But ask your accountant because, I'm pretty sure it's like where you form your business is where you file your taxes.
I actually have a question. So I have a small business where I'm working mostly with clients that are not in the tech industry. And I find it really hard to keep myself updated with the big tech company advancements because when I try to go on the web, it's overwhelming and I don't know where should I be focusing on. Do you have a few resources for people to stay up to date with the recent technology or advancements, maybe in Django, Python, or specific websites that we should keep ourselves updated with?
I think this goes back to the question that Tim had about like not isolating yourself. So I've been fortunate enough to work on, I have yet to work by myself on a project. Well, that's not true. I have like one project that I've worked by myself on. But I really prefer not to, prefer to work in teams. And I prefer to like get to know the teams. And I think it's really nice to try to like connect with them as much as possible. Like even if it's only Slack, but if you can, if you start a client project and you know, I was talking to someone about this today, and you know you're going to be working with them for 4 months, is it possible for you to go visit them for just one day and get to know them? And I think communicating with other team members is just, I mean, I work with Cactus a lot, I work with University of Penn a lot, and like I'm able to kind of keep up just by like seeing what my other people around me are doing.
All right, do we have any more questions? Okay, she will
Thank
also be available in the hallway if you have any extra questions or comments. But let's give her a big round of applause for the information.